My name is Ronya, and I'm a part of the ME/CFS team here at Arthritis, Pain Support and Emerge ACT. Welcome to our series of videos for family and friends of people living with debilitating fatigue conditions. This series is adapted from our booklet called Information for Family and Friends of People with ME/CFS, Fibromyalgia, Long COVID, and Other Conditions with Debilitating Fatigue, which is available in print and on our website. This video today gives you an overall overview of ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and long COVID, and the impact that those conditions can have on loved ones of the person who has the condition. Someone you know develops symptoms of debilitating fatigue, you may at first think that the problem is a lingering short-term illness. But at some point you realize that your loved one has entered a new realm, the world of chronic illness. Instead of resuming familiar patterns and routines, the person with debilitating fatigue will be faced with the prospect of adjusting to a different life. Their illness will present you with challenges as well. Some of the issues often faced by family members of people with debilitating fatigue conditions, and this might also apply to some friends, include taking on extra household tasks, financial strains, caregiving responsibilities, strained relationships, worry and uncertainty about the future, uncertainty about how to help the person who is ill, resentment and frustration about this new situation, grief, sadness and depression, increased stress, sexual difficulties, loss of companionship, strained communication, less socializing capacity, and having to take on extra parenting responsibilities. The most common cause of debilitating fatigue are the conditions myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome, also known as ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and more recently the onset of long COVID. These conditions are now widely recognized as real illnesses, not psychological problems. Diagnostic criteria have been established for ME/CFS and fibromyalgia, and more recently, the World Health Organization established standard diagnostic criteria for long COVID as well. These conditions are common. Research suggests that there are probably more than 250,000 living with ME/CFS in Australia. Estimates of the prevalence of fibromyalgia vary, but there are probably at least 1 million people in Australia living with fibromyalgia. Whilst there's no complete data, it's estimated that up to 1/3 of people infected with COVID-19 develop long COVID, and approximately 50% of long COVID sufferers will meet the diagnostic criteria for ME/CFS. The average person with one of these debilitating fatigue conditions has moderate to severe symptoms and will experience a reduction in activity level of between 50 to 85%. These conditions are characterized by the prevalence of several to many different symptoms. One way of understanding debilitating fatigue is the illustration of a phone battery. A well person will wake up with a battery between 90% and 100%, and as they go through their day, the battery will reduce to 40% or 50%, depending on their level of activity. Someone with a debilitating fatigue condition might wake up with as little as 5 or 10%, or none, as their battery doesn't charge overnight like it is meant to. This means that just getting out of bed and showering takes all of their battery stock. The central symptom of these conditions is debilitating fatigue that is often experienced as deep exhaustion. Other prominent symptoms include pain, sleep that is not refreshing, and cognitive problems, including confusion, difficulty concentrating, fumbling for words, or lapses in short-term memory, which can be very distressing. Other symptoms that can often also appear include headaches, low-grade fevers, a sore throat, tender lymph nodes, anxiety and depression, ringing in the ears, dizziness, gastrointestinal issues like gas, bloating, periods of diarrhea or constipation, allergies and rashes, sensitivity to light and sound, abnormal temperature sensations such as chills or night sweats, weight changes, and intolerance of alcohol. Another prominent symptom, particularly of fibromyalgia, is widespread pain, including jaw pain and dry eyes and mouth. Long COVID affects each person differently. Some have ongoing symptoms from organ damage, and others will meet the diagnostic criteria for ME/CFS or a related condition. The most commonly reported symptoms of post-COVID-19 syndrome include debilitating fatigue and respiratory symptoms, including difficulty breathing or shortness of breath and a cough. People diagnosed with any of these conditions are also commonly found to have other conditions as well, such as irritable bowel syndrome, food and chemical sensitivities, sleep disorders, for example, sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome, myofascial pain, and thyroid conditions. Long COVID symptoms may resemble or overlap with both ME/CFS and fibromyalgia. The most common additional problems with long COVID are still being determined. Here on the screen is the ME/CFS, fibromyalgia, and long COVID self-rating scale. It's good to know where your family member or loved one rate themselves on this scale. The numbers on the left represent an approximate percentage of a healthy person's capacity. So, for example, the 100%, they have the exact capacity of a healthy person, fully recovered, normal activity level with no symptoms. And as you go down the scale, the amount of activities decrease and the number or severity of symptoms increase. So at about 50%, that person is able to do 4 to 5 hours a day of work or similar activity at home. Daily rests are required and symptoms mostly moderate. And then when you get down to the bottom of the scale, at 10%, they're mostly bedridden with severe symptoms, and at 0%, completely bedridden and unable to care for themselves. Because there is so far no cure for these conditions, treatment mainly focuses on controlling and managing symptoms and improving quality of life. Approaches might include medications, alternative treatments, and self-help measures. Medications are often used for improving sleep and controlling pain, though their effectiveness varies greatly from person to person. Since no medication is consistently effective, treatment usually consists of a process of trial and error to find what works for that individual person. People can usually improve or at least manage symptoms by adjusting their activity level, reducing stress, and improving sleep. For most people, chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia are long-term conditions, as no cure has been developed so far. A few people recover completely. Some people may improve over time, while others remain stable, and a few decline. Symptoms of long COVID generally improve over time, typically 4 to 9 months post-infection, but approximately 15 in 100 people will still have symptoms at 12 months. Chronic illness is a challenge to manage because its effects are so comprehensive. Debilitating fatigue touches every aspect of life, a person's ability to work, relationships, emotions, dreams for the future, and their sense of who they are. Complicating the challenge, there is an interaction between illness and other parts of life. Debilitating fatigue restricts a person's life, but in turn can be worsened by how a person lives. For example, illness puts limits on a person's activity level, but if a person with debilitating fatigue does more than their body can tolerate, overactivity causes a higher level of symptoms. The same pattern of reciprocal effects is true for other elements as well, such as the relationship between illness and stress. Living with symptoms on a daily basis is inherently stressful. In addition, illness often creates new stress because of factors like financial pressures, strained relationships, and uncertainty about the future. In all these ways, illness increases stress. We also know that unfortunately stress often worsens symptoms. People with debilitating fatigue are very stress sensitive, so that even moderate amounts of stress can intensify symptoms, creating a feedback loop in which symptoms and a person's reaction to them intensify one another. Similarly, there is a two-way relationship between illness and emotions. Emotions like worry, anger, depression, and grief are normal reactions to chronic illness, understandable responses to a situation in which life is disrupted and routine is replaced with uncertainty. Most people experience a vicious cycle in which illness intensifies emotions, and then emotions, in turn, intensify symptoms. For example, people who become depressed because of their illness have a lower threshold for pain. Also, pain can be intensified by anger because anger usually creates muscle tension. In summary, debilitating fatigue has comprehensive effects, touching many lives of a person's life. They are much more than a simple medical problem. A plan for managing them has to address all of its effects, not just symptoms. That's all for this introductory video. The next video in this series is about how the specific situation that you and the person with debilitating fatigue are in can shape how you go about managing the impacts of the condition. If you or the person living with debilitating fatigue need further support, we are here to help. We have a range of services to support people with chronic conditions. You can just contact us at mecfs@arthritisact.org.au or call us on 026251 2055. Or you can find further free resources on our website at www.emergeact.org.au.